and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is an author as well as a fellow podcaster, no other than Miss Shannon Lawrence.
Hi.
Welcome on Book 101, Miss Shannon. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
I write mostly horror, mostly short stories, but I've branched out quite a bit from there. It's just tends to be my focus. So you'll see that most of my books right now are collections of short stories. And I also have a book out on the business of short stories for that reason, because that's how I've built a career. And now I'm starting to do novels and all of that good stuff. But that was really what built my career to begin with. So I will never leave short stories behind.
Definitely. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Miss Shannon, thank you. Your writing, especially in a collections like Blues Lodge, Blues, and other abominations, often find horror in everyday settings. What draws you to underneath the terrifying from the ordinary, and how do you approach building dread in a familiar environment?
Man, so there's horror that can be taken from a lot of stuff in daily life at any given time. But, also, it's a lot of asking, "What if?" Right? So, what if this had gone this other way? What would happen then? So that's really the basis of a lot of stories, is just figuring out, what if it had gone wrong in a really
Mm-hmm.
terrible way? And what was your second question?
Mm,
Putting dread in every day?
yes, terrifying from ordinary, and how you do approach building dread in familiar environment.
Yeah, and I actually prefer building dread in a familiar environment, right? Versus I think when people think about horror, a lot of the time they think about making this colossal, really bad, evil setting. And that's not necessary because technically, when something horrifying happens to you in like a comfortable place where you're vulnerable because you've let down
Mm-hmm.
your alarms and all of that, then that's going to be even more stunning, shocking, scary, and all that. And building dread comes from starting with something normal a lot of the time, just starting in an everyday situation and then having it go wrong and meeting out the little what's happening instead of going, here's the big monster and that's it, because that doesn't build any suspense to throw the monster or whatever it is out there right away. You want that to build and just kind of hint at it and work your way toward it.
You're master of the short story form. How does your process for crafting a powerful, self-contained short story differ from working a longer piece like your novel, The Misery House? Is it a different mental muscle?
I think it's a slightly different muscle. I think everybody should try both, especially if somebody is writing novels all the time and hasn't tried the short form. It's a really great exercise to hone more specific language, to figure out how to get to a point faster. Because, like you already kind of said in your question, there is a full story in a short story. It's not a hint at a story. It's got to be the whole thing. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So honing that helps you simplify and really clean up your writing sometimes in the longer novel form. But basically, when I can sit down, I'm not an everyday writer. I'm somebody who can get a lot done at once, but it sometimes there's a gap between when I actually can sit down and write and when I just can't because there's things going on. Because most of us have day jobs in addition to writing and families and all that good stuff. So when I actually get to sit down and write a short story, I can do in front of the TV and sit there and write and hang out. But typically for novel writing, I lock myself in my office and just have music playing. So there isn't even a difference in my processes. when I'm doing the different kinds of writing. I have See, at this point, I've been doing short stories for so long though that I kind of naturally have a rhythm
Hmm.
that to end and can look at and say, here's it should be about this long. It doesn't mean that always happens, but I can typically have that in my brain and be able to make it happen. So, yeah.
Miss Shannon, in horror and dark fantasy, the ending is crucial. How do you approach crafting endings that are both satisfying and genuinely unsettling, avoiding cliche while delivering a powerful punch?
I like so in horror twists are very common. And even when I write mystery, for example, I tend to have some manner of twist at the end. It's just I think the way my brain works. But it- to get there, you just let me see. So in horror, it's really hard to avoid having an ending that lets everybody down. And to point out one of the things that Stephen King, for example, who's makes a gazillion dollars off of his horror, uh, one of the criticisms of him is that he does terrible endings. I'm not sure I would necessarily agree most of the time, but he seems to agree. So I think he said it himself. So that is something that you have in your head, I think. If you know that, if you're a horror writer, you go in and you're like, I do not want to have a bad ending. And sometimes that means bringing it to a conclusion, but hinting at something more so that people get to go away with it and decide what they think happened. And of course, with horror specifically, it's maybe the only genre that doesn't have to have a happy ending or like it has to have a satisfying ending still. And I think that's got to be the focus is this ending has to satisfy the build up to it. It has to match what was going on. And the thing about a twist is the twist still has to be supported. It still has to support what came before it. Person seeing that twist has to be able to say, okay, I can see why or how that happened. So it's looking at stuff like that and making sure that you've made something real that isn't a trick so much that does have any backing to it.
Miss Shannon, can you walk us through your version process for a short story? What does Miss Shannon Lawrence story look like in the first draft versus a final published form?
I actually write pretty clean at first, and maybe that's just come down to fighting for time to write so often that when I write, it comes out. I don't have a bunch of typos. I don't have a bunch of issues that shouldn't be there. So when I edit, very little of that is like line editing. And most of that is did I do all the story things that need to happen? Did I tie up everything? Did I slip something in there and never use it? So that's really what my edits are for after a first draft. But the first draft tends to be pretty clean because if I need to inject something, because I don't plot. So I might get to a point and go, wait, I have this thing and now I have to support it. And so then I'll go back and add that in as I'm going so that I can make it make sense moving forward as well. So that, yeah, first draft, it doesn't take a ton of editing typically.
Miss Shannon, your characters are often relatable people thrown into extraordinary circumstances. How do you quickly establish character empathy in a short story so that the reader is invested in their terrifying journey from the very beginning?
So character empathy is insanely important in horror, just like probably in romance. For example, you have to care what happens to the characters to really feel the necessary sense of dread or horror or whatever happens. So I just typically, because you don't have a lot of space in a short story for sure, you don't want to have a bunch of backstory. So I like to put somebody in an immediate situation that people can identify with. So for example, if I started them off at the supermarket and they might get a call or be thinking about something, because of course if we're inside that character, then we have that flexibility that they have this concern, and I want that to be relatable. So that's how I'm going to try and work it in so that I immediately establish. It's kind of like I haven't read it, but I understand the concept of I think is it Blake Snyder. I don't know. That Save the Cat
Mhm.
is his whole thing is, and that's based off screenwriting, is to establish something that makes the character likable right away in some simple way, right? So that's kind of a concept that I follow anyway. Just how can I make this person as human as possible, as quickly as possible, so we can move forward into the story and really understand what's happening and care about what's happening. And in a novel, you do sort of the same thing at the beginning, but you have a lot more leeway to add in a lot more about that character as you go. And of course, how they respond to what's happening in the short story as they go, whatever the horrifying thing is that's happening, that also has the power to either make the reader lose interest or to be more invested in that character.
Interesting indeed, Miss Shannon. You've been very open about the challenges of writing with a chronic illness. How do you process adapted to accommodate your health, as well as the advice would you give to these writers facing similar obstacles?
So to make sure that I'll say kind of what some of my chronic illnesses are so that people out there kind of know what it is so they can maybe relate more. But um, I was recently diagnosed. I mean, I've had problems for a long time. It took them this long to figure it out, but with hypermobility, which is kind of a lighter form of Ehlers-Danlos, if people have heard of that. And that causes a whole strata of issues from those connective tissues in your body being looser than they're supposed to be or having issues. So the that causes so, like, I have fibromyalgia, I have chronic fatigue, I have all this stuff that goes with it. I have old fractures and stuff like that, from other things. So, a lot of chronic pain issue, basically, and things that require not just sitting around all the time. But in addition, not really, it's not an illness, but I'm also autistic, and that involves working around some things there as well. And so coping with that, I mean, a lot of people with chronic illnesses, they've been coping with it forever, right? So they already have their methods of dealing with things and making sure that they can function in general. I think that's something a lot of people take for granted if they don't have chronic issues, is that functioning can mean something different to everybody. So that may mean that I understand that I need to set a timer to get up because it's hurting my back to sit there for a really long time. And so I might move around every, so often, once an hour, get up and move around for 10 minutes or something. I tend to, though, as an autistic, hyper focus when I'm writing. And so then I can go just hours and hours and hours if I don't do something uh, th- that I thought about right ahead of time, like set that timer. So it's something that I need to pay attention to. And it's just figuring out the coping mechanisms that work for each individual for their chronic issues. But I have a lot of little methods and little tricks and little things I do to make sure that I'm not kind of abusing myself. Because I will sit down and just do something for 12 hours straight or something and not get up and go do something I need to do. So it really is just looking at yourself and saying, what can I do to help and support myself? Because we tend to, chronic pain folks and chronic illness folks tend to talk very negatively about ourselves and to be down on ourselves because we feel like we're not doing what everybody else expects us to do or what we're supposed to do. But I'm highly productive and I'm working around other things. So it's nonsense and it's just nasty talk to yourself. So it's really taking care of yourself that matters to help you get through all of that and to cope.
Between blogging, short stories, novels, and nonfiction, you work in many forms. How do you decide which projects gets to your focus on any given day, and how do you mentally switch between these different modes of writing?
I tend to stick to, like, one thing in a day if I can, but I do juggle a lot of things at one time, and sometimes if I'm bouncing around too much, that means I'm going to sit down and say, "What do I need to get done first? What is the most important thing? What does my schedule for these look like?" and then I'm going to have to hone in on that and focus. So, yeah, there's sometimes that's to-do lists and sometimes that's just sitting there writing and putting things, ranking things basically for what should I be doing right now. So it depends. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to mood. Like today, I don't want to work on this. I want to work on this because it's what's really eating at me in my head. It's the thing that's knocking and saying, this is what you need to be writing.
Miss Shannon, as an author as well as a podcast host, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
What are my short term goals?
Yes,
Mhm.
please.
Uh, for short term goals, it's typically kind of in my head as basically by project. So my short term goals are I'm going to have this many books out this year, or I'm going to submit this many short stories. So I had a lapse because I was in a job that wasn't great and I just wasn't in a place where I was being creative for a bit. And I've gotten back to it and it feels amazing, but that also means like reeling myself in. And so I have a goal of getting back up to probably 20 short stories on submission at any given time. And that doesn't mean I'm going to write 20 short stories in a week. That means that I'm going to just be writing them, editing, and then submitting them as I go until I get up to that number. And then I have so many projects I want to work on, but there's several books I want to just get out there and get on submission and do all that good stuff. So I have some specific projects this year, and it's looking like there's at least 3 books. I wanna finish 3 books this year, and that would be great.
Good luck for that.
Thank you.
Miss Shannon, good luck, and looking forward for your success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people that want to be a podcast host as well as an author like you?
For podcast hosting, I mean, you know this quite well. It's people need to realize it takes a lot of time, that there's a lot more to it than sitting there and having a conversation. There's there's editing and there's the setup and there's the getting the guests and all of that. So, my advice is to not go into it thinking this will be an easy thing on the side. This is
Yes.
gonna be something that you're investing in time just like you do your writing. So, yeah, my advice is to look at that ahead of time and really get a realistic view of what everything looks like and what you want to achieve and look at those short-term goals and how does this all fit in with that? Does the podcasting fit in with the writing at this time? So, yeah, it would be to do that research and take that long look at it before jumping in.
Yes. Yes. Do the research first, people. But we're encouraging you. If you have the passion to be a podcast host, please do so. And let's empower people all over the world through
Absolutely.
your podcast. Thank you for that advice, Miss Shannon. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Uh, that's right. Recommend a book that has really
Yes.
influenced my writing. I hate to be a cliche, but one of the first books on writing that I read was On Writing by Stephen King. And it's more of a kind of memoir that mixes in advice. And he put a realistic spin on everything because you go into it with big stars in your eyes and thinking that it's something that it's not necessarily. And it's just a really encouraging book to get people where they need to be to start writing with hope and with positive outlook, but also with realistic ideas about what they're moving into.
Realistic ideas. And thank you for that recommended book, Miss Shannon. Thank you, thank you. So, if you are a prolific short story writer, is there a single story you've written that you feel is your darkest or most personal? And if so, what made it so?
Hmm. I'm not sure about darkest or most personal. I'm trying to think about that. Most personal, I would say, no, I can't think of one of those. But darkest, I have a story that is called Coffin Birth, and it was addressing racism and it was addressing some other issues, and it is pretty dark. in a different way from things that are just kind of about, say, gore or violence. So, Cop and Birth, I would say, is one of my darker ones to this date because it's emotional. It's got more to it than one might see on the surface.
Well, before we wrap up our discussion for today, Miss Shannon, I'm inviting you to please don't listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, law 101. Mental Health 101 and Bible Verses 101, Science 101 and Sex 101 in its second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Shannon, with a novel and multiple short story collection out in the world, what new creative territory or genre are you most excited to explore next?
I really wanting to jump into mystery and thriller more. So I've been doing dark fantasy and horror and all of that, and I've had some good luck writing mystery short stories and getting those sold right away. So I feel like maybe there's something there for me there, and I have a whole idea for a series. So yeah, mystery right now is what I'm looking forward to.
Miss Shannon Lawrence, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books, your advocacy, your podcast, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me the easiest at thewarriormuse.com. And that has links to the podcast website. And the podcast is Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem. It has links to my available books. And you'll be seeing my newest book, The Killing Tree and Other Afflictions, popping up on there next week.
Yes, people that support Miss Shannon Lawrence. Because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering books, more episodes of the podcast itself will rise. So, Miss Shannon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, more to come, people. See you soon.
Bye.